Buried inside their headquarters in San Diego, beneath layers of security, is the DEA lab.
So is this the most dangerous station?
I would say so.
Senior forensic chemist Dean Kirby has been coming to work here for almost 2 decades and said he's never dealt with anything like fentanyl. It's 50 times stronger than heroin, up to 100 times more powerful than morphine.
So to give you a point of reference too,
Yes.
this is only 2 milligrams in here, and I don't know, you can barely see it.
2 milligrams of fentanyl.
That's what 2 milligrams looks like. And 2 milligrams is what they consider the lethal dosage of fentanyl. So if you or I would take that somehow in our body, potentially there's a good chance we could die.
That's crazy that such a tiny little amount can be that deadly.
Exactly.
It doesn't even seem real.
Yes, that's how potent it is.
He has to protect his skin and his eyes to handle it. If enough finds its way into your blood or brain, it can kill you. That may be how Elton Banks died from a fentanyl overdose when he was 10, after an afternoon of swimming at the public pool. How he was exposed remains a mystery. Same for 12-year-old Kanye Chappelle, who was found unconscious at a kid's birthday party, chewing gum still in his mouth.
The lungs will absorb it, and then it causes the reaction. Or it could get into your eye, same thing, it goes into your body. If you have a cut on your skin, it potentially could go into your blood system that way too. So that's what makes it dangerous. It's the fact that it's usually in a very fine particulate, and that can easily get into your body.
Kirby showed us how the cartels pushed the drug on unsuspecting users through fake pills secretly made with fentanyl, like these counterfeit oxycodone. This was before users had any idea what it was and no intention of taking it.
These are M30s?
Yeah, these are the M30s, which are very common on the street now.
Can I touch that?
Yes, you can. So each one of those is about 100 milligrams, which is about the right weight for an oxycodone pill. And they're stamped properly, which you have the M on one side and then a 30 on the back. And so that's what this indicates. And so the ones next to it are clearly counterfeit, just because the coloring, you can tell, is very off.
Right.
The color dyes and pill presses to make these usually come from the kings of counterfeit, the Chinese, often sent along with precursor chemicals in shipping containers bound for Mexico. That's how the DEA said China and the cartels quickly filled the void after the U.S. cracked down on prescription drugs.
I've been here a long time, and week after week I come in here and I'm like, you gotta be kidding. It's bigger than last week. Seeing fentanyl at this volume, how is this possible? Where does this end? And then realizing that we're not catching it all at the border or wherever. A lot of it's coming through. And some unintended person is getting this and ingesting it and potentially dying.
Family members gathered at Staten Lake this afternoon. They held photos of loved ones who died from opioid abuse. They say they want the dealers held accountable.
The trail of death that follows fentanyl is long, and overdose is not a term their families like to hear. To them, it's murder.
We demand that the judicial system start treating these drug dealers like the murderers that they are.
And they want the dealers of death to pay for taking so many so young. Like Daniel Joseph Puerta Johnson, 16. Alexander Neville, 14. Charlie Ternan, 22. Justin Allen, 24. Fentanyl isn't a drug to the families who want justice. It's poison. And their children, like Alexandra Capeluto, the forgotten victims of drug homicide.
My daughter, Alexandra, was 20 years old. My wife found Alex dead in her bedroom.
Through this organization, her parents are among those working to change the language and the law from overdose to homicide.
My daughter had ingested a counterfeit Oxycontin pill with enough fentanyl to kill 5 people.
Her life ended suddenly at 20 because the pain pill Alexandra took was fentanyl instead of oxy. In San Diego, 3 people overdose and die every day.
Our people, DEA agents specifically, they weren't built for that, to walk into a bedroom of a 17-year-old and see her in first, second stage of rigor mortis. That's not what they're used to seeing, right? They're used to seeing shootings and cartel shootouts.
As head of the DEA here, John Callery has the formidable task of trying to stop the tidal wave of fentanyl and meth rising daily on the streets. Under him, the DEA leads a joint task force, Team 10, that responds to overdose calls.
It affects them, and I have to be mindful of how long they're exposed to that, and it takes their toll. It takes a toll. When you ask about what is the effect on society, it takes a toll on detectives and DEA agents to see that. But I'll tell you this, they're invigorated by it.
By what they're able to do.
By what they see, because they're going to stay there as long as it takes to put somebody in handcuffs.
We executed a search warrant and discovered that there was fentanyl extraction going on at this residence.
While Team 10 belongs to the DEA, it's supervised by San Diego PD and includes agents from the FBI and Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI.
There was one adult male arrested.
They've arrested and prosecuted dealers, which is what the forgotten victims of drug homicide want.
They'll get a call out. 2 or 3 members will go, and they'll, what we call it triage now. They'll go and say, is this viable? Is there a chance that we can get a hold of this trafficker? Once they decide, yeah, I think this is viable, then the whole team comes out. Because once the team comes out, it could end up being 4 hours. It could end up being 36 hours.
And try to take advantage of that moment, right?
That moment in
Do
time.
another buy right there,
That
same
moment
dealer.
in time to try to get that dealer to come back out and say, hey, that what you sent me wasn't good. Can you come back out? I don't want to get deep into this because we're doing
You don't
it
wanna
tonight.
give it away,
Probably,
right.
And the interesting part, Lara, is this. We're so used to being involved in investigations. You know, we hit a house in a search warrant and nobody knows nothing. I don't know.
No one will talk to you.
No one's going to talk. In these cases, everybody wants to talk because that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's granddaughter, grandson, that's somebody's boyfriend, that's somebody's girlfriend. And when we get there, they're like, oh yeah, I'll tell you who dropped that off. Here's who it is. Here's his phone number. Here's the car he drives. We're not used to that. So that's that triage I was talking about. How viable is this? Because there might be 3 in a night. So we can't send 12 people to focus on one because there might be another one an hour from now.
After so many years with the DEA in California, John Callery has a touch of Hollywood in his veins. You may even find him on set with Don Cheadle, Benicio del Toro, Luis Guzman, and so on. The gritty details in films like Sicario and Traffic that seem so real often are, thanks in part to 3 decades Callery has spent on the front lines of counter-narcotics from LA to Bangkok and beyond.
An overdose victim brought back to life on a downtown sidewalk.
He's seen fentanyl come out of nowhere, take root, and ravage his city. But said it would be worse without the miracle drug Narcan.
Paramedics arrived, gave her Narcan. Miraculously, the once dying overdose victim gets back on her feet.
Narcan's amazing. The number is about 42 to 45,000 people died. Did not come back to life, died of opioid overdose deaths. But that's not a real number of how many people in the United States overdosed, were dead, if not Narcan being applied to them. So our EMTs do an amazing job. They get there in an amazing period of time, minutes, usually less than 10 minutes when a call goes out. They apply Narcan to the victim, and the victim comes back to life. Without that drug, that person would be dead.
How often does that happen?
It's happening as we speak here in San Diego, I guarantee you. I guarantee you, as we're sitting here, there's a call going out right now of an overdose victim that they're bringing back to life. Every 10 seconds in the United States, something like that. I bet it's less than that.
Someone is overdosing.
Right now, as you and I are speaking, somebody is getting a Narcan device shoved up their nose, being pressed, and they're popping back to life.
Emergency services and sheriffs in San Diego in 2019
Where's he at?
used Narcan over 2,500 times.
2 Narcans prior to our arrival. I just administered 3rd Narcan.
Opiates like fentanyl change the chemistry in the brain when they bind to opioid receptors and boost dopamine levels. Once a person is addicted, their brain relies on the drug instead of its own neurotransmitters to carry the messages between our nerve cells that tell us how to think, act, and feel. Narcan quickly reverses an overdose by blocking the brain's opioid receptors. Patients who've stopped breathing completely can come alive in minutes.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You're right. You're right. Lay down. Lay down.
How many overdose victims can you save like that with Narcan?
80 to 85% of people are coming back. And then it depends on how many doses of Narcan they're given, how fast they get there. Not all of them come back the person they were.
Because of the damage that's done
Because
to
of the
their
brain
brains.
damage. If you're out, you're not getting oxygen 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes. How long does it take the EMT to get there? First of all, how long does it take your buddy to say, "Oh, I don't think Susie's doing too good. Let me call 911." And then there's always that pause, right? Do I want to call 911 and get in trouble, or do I just run away?
But 85%, that's a lot of people that are safe.
It's a remarkable number.
Who's paying for that?
You're paying for that. Taxpayers are paying for that. Of course you are. Narcan's not cheap, and fire departments and EMTs, they're going through it like candy.
On Friday night, I had a call from my friend who was a 31-year veteran of the police department in California. He worked with me on narcotics. He spent a lot of his career fighting the war on drugs in his own community. And he called me Friday in tears. His daughter, who was a young girl, I knew her well, died of an overdose. She took a pill with 4 friends. All 4 of them died.
When Sherry Oz was working Vice as a young detective on the streets of Phoenix, there weren't that many women in police uniform anywhere. But the long, crazy nights prepared her well for a career taking on drug cartels and gangs at the DEA. 10 years were in LA, where she came to know her friend and his family.
4 people took 4 pills and all 4 of them died?
All 4.
Is that happening a lot?
It does happen a lot. The fun of drugs, and we talked a little bit about that, why it's enticing or why it brings people in. And it's something that we can't ignore because it is fun right up until your friend turns blue and dies next to you. And that's what's happening. A lot of the kids that I talk to from high school parties, they don't think it's going to happen to them. And one of the kids has no effect because they're just getting laxative. The other kid dies. And they never saw that coming. They just wanted to have fun or party or...
It's not part of the conversation.
No. And we need to start talking about that. This friend of mine is devastated. He lost his daughter. His daughter who knew better. His daughter who he talked to about drugs every day. Not every day, but often.
It was a big part of their life.
Absolutely. And she's gone. And he can never get her back.
This pill, parafluorofentanyl, killed 11 people in Arizona in 1 week, according to Oz. It's the latest, more addictive and deadlier version of fentanyl from Mexico's cartels. The DEA identified it the only way they can, by running tests in a lab.
So it's got all the markings on it that Xanax would have?
So you would look at that and think that this is an actual Xanax.
Can you tell the difference just by looking at them?
No. Some of them have some imperfections in the mold, so if you knew the exact stamp, you could maybe pick it out. But most people are not going to pull out a comparison chart. You would just assume that's a Xanax. It looks like it feels like it, it's going to crumble like it.
How they're made is more tossed salad than science.
We'll take this fentanyl and we'll put it in our baby laxative in a household blender, right?
They'll take something like baby powder, Oz said, and throw in enough fentanyl to get you high.
And then we blend it.
Or if it doesn't mix right, kill you. That's what's known as a hot pill.
Then we'll take this powder and we'll move it right here into our pill press.
So how much powder is in there?
This has a couple cups. We would pour it right through here, and then we would hand crank the pills out. And as fast as you can crank is how many pills. It just presses them into nice, cute little pills that can be shaped however you like. This is an Adderall. So you think you're going to stay up and study? Nope, you're going to die. This is the M30s.
Do they add anything to this?
No, they don't have to.
So you could literally just take baby formula and fentanyl in a blender, press it, and make pills.
Yep. This one is an industrial size pill press. We seize that right here in Arizona. It's capable of making 20,000 pills an hour. So if it costs about $10,000, within your first hour of running it, 2 hours of running it, you've paid for the cost of the pill press. This one, same type of setup, it just does it quicker. The pills come out of here like you're winning the lottery or slot machine.
Who's making these? How experienced or skilled do you have to be?
You wouldn't have to be at all. These are mid-level traffickers. They have a connection with a cartel where they're bulk buying fentanyl. They bring it to their home, your next door neighbors. They add it with flour, sugar, baby formula, whatever presses well.
If you've got such tiny grains of fentanyl, Aren't a lot of those pills just have nothing in them?
Some of them. Because it's not mixed, if you were doing it in a laboratory, you would have a consistency in your mixture. There would be quality control. Because they're doing it in a blender or with their hand, that's why every pill is different. There's no way to tell if the pill that you're taking is going to have more or less fentanyl than another pill. They'll look the same. Everything about them will feel the same.
What if there's nothing, no fentanyl in it?
Then
you don't get a high.
You live another day.
Taking down a lab where pills are made means a mobile truck like this one, chemical wash showers, and protective gear.
Who is this?
This is Santa. He's a 2-year-old Belgian Malinois.
But it's not always enough.
Oh my gosh, you can see that he's 2 years old because look at him. So is he okay? Am I okay to touch him, or is he?
He might just lick you.
I don't mind being licked. He might just lick you and jump all over you. Okay, Santa. Okay, Santa.
He's excited.
For dogs like Santa, Task Force Officer Derek Frywald said chemicals in powder form are lethal. That's what killed Canine Max in 2011 on an operation in LA with Oz.
We had a conversion lab in a van and we didn't know. So the dog went in there and went to alert on some liquid methamphetamine and ingested some of those chemicals. And within an hour of that, he was dead.
That's terrible.
Just gotta watch these dogs because once they get the alert, I still watch them because you just never know what's in some of these drugs or anything like that. And their senses are so much heightened. I mean, it just takes even smaller than what we take in for them to, because of their body, they're only like 65 pounds, 70 pounds.
Is it more of a danger now than it used to be?
Anything with fentanyl, once it gets in the air and goes into their nose and then right into their bodies.
We can't come up with a protection equipment for a dog because they're there for their sense of smell.
Technology has made life harder for the DEA, easier for dealers.
You dial up a number, you get online, you tell somebody, hey, I need, 5 pills of Oxy. You send them a Venmo, and they have a guy deliver it to your house. That's drug trafficking in 2020, 2021.
It's incredible.
It's incredible, right?
How easy and how anonymous it is.
So easy, right? It used to be a drug deal. There had to be a lot of trust on both sides, right? We show up with the money, they show up with the dope. You show me the money, no, you show me the dope. Now there's no money. The money went through Venmo. The money went through Bitcoin. So they're pretty sharp, but we're pretty sharp too.
From DoorDash to the dark web.
So what are we looking at here?
All right, so let's buy some drugs.
Literally, this is what you can do.
This is it.
Oz showed us listings for illicit drugs. She said they're up more than 400% in this sinister space where you can buy snuff films along with your high.
You get on a Tor browser that you can download very easily, and then you start looking up websites to buy whatever you can imagine. There are sites you can go to get a list of all the websites. In this case, we have multiple dark websites that are up, and we can buy, you'll see right here,
great quality crystal meth.
And they're marketing with Pac-Man and cartoons. We see Mickey Mouse. We see the most innocent cartoon you can imagine. So the marketing is geared towards kids, towards children. You don't use Pac-Man to get me. You can see here on the menu, benzos, cannabis, disassociatives, ecstasy, opioids, prescriptions.
Psychedelics,
steroids, stimulants.
Under Oz, the DEA in Phoenix has partnered with an old friend from Phoenix PD, Chief Deborah Black. She's responsible for making sure the small town of Prescott, Arizona, some 95 miles to the north, stays one of the best places in the country to retire.
When you became a police chief in 2016, what were the narcotics that people were using there?
Primarily oxycodone, which was still prescription grade to some extent, but becoming more and more of the synthetic that was being trafficked from Mexico. And heroin. Heroin was very significant in 2016, 2017.
You didn't mention fentanyl.
No.
It literally didn't exist.
No.
When did it appear?
Into 2017, 2018, early 2018, we had 2 young athletes from our community college that both overdosed at the same time, accidental. They had been at a party and they grabbed pills and took them when they went back to their home that night, and they both died. And that was the single most shocking event related to young people overdosing that had affected our area to date.
That had ever happened?
Nothing like that had happened before.
Gunnar Bundrick and his friend Jake Morales, both 19, were found unconscious. Cause of death, the medical examiner ruled, fentanyl. With that, America's deadliest drug had invaded the quiet suburban streets of a place known as everyone's hometown.
And as shocking as that is, just in the last couple of months, we lost a 14-year-old girl. And her reason for taking a pill was because she was nervous about going to school the next day.
Alondra Valeria Salinas got her backpack ready one night in October last year, not knowing the anxiety pill she'd taken was really fentanyl. The next morning, her mother couldn't wake her.
Within one pill, you can cut it in half, and half of it is fine. The other half is deadly. We started a campaign back in 2018 called One Pill Can Kill, just to get the word out about how random this is and how anything you take that is not pharmaceutical grade, that is not from a trusted source, is at risk of having fentanyl and killing you.
It happened so quickly.
So quickly. It's up about 50% in 2020. And most of those are young people. Most of those are not people that are suffering addiction. They're taking a pill for a different reason. Sometimes out of boredom, sometimes because it's exciting, sometimes to stop pain,
sometimes for anxiety,
for all kinds of reasons that anybody would take something, and with this false sense of it's safe. And it's not safe, and you can have purchased from somebody over and over and over again without any problem, yet one time is enough.
So when you say it's personal for you, tell me how it's personal.
My husband and I got married in 2000, and he brought 3 sons to the family, and I brought 1 daughter. Matt is the youngest boy, and great kid, tremendous athlete, loved ATVs and motorcycles and anything automotive. He got that definitely from his dad. Went on to become a sales manager for a company that sold ATVs. And so he was doing well. He was working hard. He had a home.
His own home?
His own home, live-in girlfriend. And he never used substance.
No history of drug use?
No.
That wasn't part of his lifestyle?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. He was very clear on liking Coors Light. The rest of that had no use to him.
So he just really had a normal kind of upbringing?
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that he lost his best friend to suicide, and that impacted him in a very profound way.
How old were they?
19.
The stress of a small family and bills in an uncertain economy troubled Matt, according to his stepmom, until...
In summer of 2018, he was feeling a tremendous amount of that anxiety, and somebody recommended that he reach out to a guy and get something stronger. Get something stronger than alcohol.
So he did, through someone he met on Snapchat, who sold him 5 pills. Chief Black told us he just wanted to feel better long enough to go to work the next day. But instead, he stayed home, and when his girlfriend checked on him, he told her he was feeling better.
And then he took another pill, and she found him on the kitchen floor when she came home from work, and he had died. And we found out that he got what's known as a hot pill. The pill he took killed him, had a deadly dose of fentanyl in it.
And any one of those pills could have been that?
Or none of them. I can't tell you what a shock it was to find out. It never even occurred to us to talk to Matt about pills, about One Pill Can Kill, about fentanyl, because we knew that wasn't his thing. what this has done to his brothers, to his mom, to his dad, has been the hardest thing I've ever witnessed.
Do you think he knew?
He thought he was taking, what he had asked for was Percocet, just something to take the edge off the pain, the anxiety. We wish he would have reached out, and he knew we were all a phone call away. He didn't.
Being in uniform all these years, you've pretty much seen it all. And yet, what happened to Matt just came out of nowhere.
Just kick in the gut. There's no getting over it.
The sea of migrants headed for the U.S. in January as Joe Biden took office, who forced their way into Guatemala, overwhelming their soldiers, showed the scale of the task ahead for those securing the U.S.-Mexico border. Just knowing if people are who they say is a challenge, and agents admitted too often it's impossible. Their new marching orders showed the surge in numbers was part of the Biden plan, and with one exception for convicted felons, all those who enter the U.S. illegally will now be legal once Border Patrol takes their biometrics and releases them into the U.S. with 5 years grace and a notice to appear in immigration court that Homeland Security figures show is often ignored. As the new administration opened up the U.S. border, Mexico's government doubled down on its sovereignty, restricting cooperation with U.S. law enforcement, making it harder to go after the cartels.
Mexico, for us, for the drug trade, is ground zero.
And this legislation from the Mexican government means
It's going to be very difficult to get over.
U.S. agents, DEA, law enforcement of any agency will no longer have immunity from prosecution.
Which to me, it's kind of ironic that you're looking at targeting DEA agents for doing our job, for sharing information, for working with the Mexican government for their security, for bringing down their murder rate, but you're not willing to pass laws and implement a judicial process to target cartels. You can have a president meet with the mother of Chapo Guzman and say Happy Easter, but you can't help DEA and our counterparts in Mexico identify active and hundreds of methamphetamine labs in states
that you've already identified and have given them the intelligence on.
With the cooperation of our counterparts in Mexico, but yet they can take in a week, pass legislation in the government of Mexico limiting DEA from working together bilaterally with the Mexican government. It's damaging to both countries.
So what does that say to you?
I mean, there's a level of corruption. We're waiting for Mexico to say when's enough's enough. 71,000 overdose deaths every year in the United States. 35,000 murders in Mexico last year. Heads chopped off, arms chopped off, put in boxes, put in acid. That's well over 100,000 people every year.
Whenever there's a surge in people tying up agents, DEA and Border Patrol said that's usually used as a cover for a bigger surge in drugs and all things illegal, like cartel cash, guns, and in some cases, hackers, terrorists, and spies, people who may be a real threat to U.S. security. That's a win for Mexico's cartels, U.S. enemies, and adversaries like the Chinese. A loss for the most vulnerable Americans, like 2-year-old Jasani Carey Jr. in California, whose mother was charged with murder when he succumbed to fentanyl, and 29-year-old Patrick Savoy O'Neill, who was fighting his fentanyl addiction when his body was found alongside baby Liam's, the 13-month-old son his wife said he adored.
We haven't given up. We get punched in the face every day. We know, we see it. We know we don't win all the fights, and we know we probably won't win the war, but they're still out there fighting. And they're fighting for the people at home that are begging us, please don't let this happen to my kid. Some people, it's beyond help at this point. But there are people that are still can be helped.
How important is the border to you in that fight and securing the border?
It's huge, right? It's the beginning. It's the beginning of the journey of the poison to cross America. It's gotten politicized, but it's very, very important that we can control our border, not just for drugs, but for illegal aliens, for terrorists that may be crossing the border. It's imperative.
The idea for DEA is we don't want the drugs to get to the United States. We need to figure out how to stop them there, how to get the cartels to stop producing them, and they're going to go to jail. But you need bilateral cooperation, sometimes trilateral cooperation with other countries, and we can't do it our own.
This looks like a really critical moment for the US because you have the most powerful criminal organizations in the world who are also the wealthiest and the most violent. And the only thing stopping them is that border. And you're now looking at a Mexican government that has dealt a death blow to cooperation with the US and also knows perfectly well that there are growing relationships with the Chinese within their own borders. That's not a good sign for the US, especially if you factor in an administration that favors a more open border, that's intent on abolishing ICE, no deportations for 100 days, decriminalizing crossing the border illegally. You put all those things together, wow. I mean, that's not an incremental change in policy that you adapt to. That's catastrophic.
It's devastating. A lot of people don't give much attention to the drug trafficking and the overdose deaths until it happens to you, until it's your kid or it's your neighbor or it's your parents. And then when it touches home, then you realize and you pay attention on how devastating this problem is and how it's going to be if we don't right some wrongs right now.
Right across the Texas border in the Mexican city of Miguel Alemán, another crazy night of a never-ending, escalating war. It's not what American justice was designed for. Rival factions of Mexico's parallel government, the real power now. U.S. jurisdiction ends with sovereign territory at the Rio Grande. Hostage to a government taking orders from the cartels.